Where are we headed in terms of content delivery? I'm R.V. Gundur, a lecturer in criminology here at Flinders University. Today I'm going to be talking about learning and teaching online, particularly as we think about creating and consuming online content. I have three questions that I want to address. First, what are the options that we have in terms of creating content? Second, how do students use or not use the content that we produce for them? And third, what are the resource implications of delivering different types of content? Before I dig into those questions, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of confronting the reality of learning online. 2020 has forced almost every teacher to think in radically different ways in terms of how content is delivered. For those of us who are used to face-to-face learning experiences, and I'm talking about teachers and students alike, there has been a huge learning curve in terms of how to teach and learn online. The truth is that both teachers and students need new skills to be able to operate online, and far too often, both teachers and students are not given the training to be able to adjust to those new learning interactions in an effective and positive way. Even before COVID harshed our vibe, a common refrain I'd hear from students would be that they thought learning online is easier than learning face-to-face. In my experience, for the overwhelming majority of students, that simply isn't true. To achieve similar outcomes online compared to face-to-face learning, you often need to invest a significantly larger amount of time. When you're learning online, even when the materials are great and geared towards that learning experience, you're required to exercise a significantly higher amount of autonomy in your learning experience. As an online student, it becomes your job to set your routine, avoid distractions, find motivation, and communicate with your teachers and your peers when you need to. Oftentimes as an online student, you need to build in time to watch content more than once, or to ask questions, and to allow for time to get responses. You need to seek out your peers. That's the point of university, to learn together. It's not me-versity, right? And sometimes you need to venture outside of the routines and learning techniques that you're used to in your on-campus face-to-face settings. That's because online learning doesn't work the same way. As a student, you need to go beyond the learning management systems and the resources that are immediately available to learn how to do things on your own. Learning online is a lot of work. It's exhausting, and that is often underestimated. But learning experiences are a two-way street, and don't think for a second I'm blaming students for the outcomes that we've seen in 2020 and the disappointment students feel about their learning experiences in online environments. I think that a lot of this boils down to expectations and being realistic about what is possible in online learning. As a community, we need to do a better job of being clear about online learning and the challenges and limitations within it. A lot of students and their parents and policymakers don't really have a grasp about what we do as educators, and that's true whether we're teaching in grade schools, high schools, or in universities. I think teachers around the world are tired of hearing that we're not doing our jobs fully and are not providing students with full tuition or some variation of that complaint. Or we get told that teaching online doesn't take any more time than face-to-face experiences. That old chestnut. We've all heard it, and it's frustrating because we know that it is pure, unadulterated, grade A bullshit. Oops, I'm not supposed to curse, but I live in Australia, and I'm pretty sure I've heard worse on the radio. Anywho, let me get back to my three questions. First, what are the options we have in terms of creating content? This year, I have trialed three content types. I streamed full-length lectures in real time online via Twitch. I produced condensed YouTube-style educational videos that condense the content from 1 hour of lectures into less than 15 minutes. And I produced an audio podcast where I interviewed experts from around the world. Now, before I continue, I think that this is a time that we need to collect a ton of information as we go about making decisions regarding how we are going to teach online. We need to work on identifying inefficiencies, dispelling myths in terms of what works and what doesn't, and develop strategies that result in good products that students want to consume and that help them learn together. We need to make sure that they can achieve the learning objectives that we need them to. Those points go to my other two questions, which are how much time does it take to create content and what content do students actually consume? Those questions, I might add, are sometimes distinct from what students say they want. Okay, so let me first talk about live streaming lectures. When COVID hit, I had a chat with my pal out in Queensland who told me that his university was talking about shutting down campus and going online. So I had a bit of a jump to get ready. I wanted to provide my students with an experience that emulated the lecture. I needed to make sure that the technologies I used could push large amounts of bandwidth and scale the experience to the resources available to the end user. Video is chunky, and our Australia and internet here is skinny. I knew that a sudden jump online would stress bandwidth across the university systems and the internet relays that my students depended on in order to access the World Wide Web. And this indeed happened, but I didn't have big problems with my content delivery. My solution was to set up a Twitch stream and pipe it back into our learning management system. Now, Twitch is a platform that folks use to stream video games. That means it's built to deal with large bandwidth demands. Plus, it has 4 additional advantages. First, it's free. Second, the software to run a Twitch stream is also free, and it's open source. Third, the videos archive automatically and are downloadable, so you can upload them to the learning management system later. And fourth, I think this is an advantage that is completely underrated. Streaming on Twitch can serve as free advertising. The content we as teachers produce is not as valuable as the skill training that we provide. Don't believe me? Have a look at Harvard's public lectures. They give lots of class content away for free. Does that content being accessible online cut the desire for Harvard students to take the class? Of course not, because the value they get is from the interactions with their teachers and peers and the opportunities to develop their skills with confidence and have those skills certified in the form of a degree. Okay, let me talk logistics and cost, both in terms of gear and time for the Twitch stream. Now, I had never used Twitch before, so it took me probably 3 days of work to set everything up and test it to the point where I was satisfied that it would work. I could probably set somebody up in a couple of hours now. In terms of hardware and internet, I used the following things. I used my work computer with its onboard camera. I used an external good directional microphone and an XLR to 16th inch audio cable to connect that microphone to my computer. I had a mic stand to hold the mic, and I used my work internet. My work computer and onboard camera were sufficient. Good internet was mandatory, however, so if I wanted to do this at home, I would have had to upgrade my internet at significant cost. If I lived in any city in the United States, this probably wouldn't have been an issue. I spent probably $250 on the mic, cable, and stand, plus there was the computer given to me by work. Now, you might be asking, why spend all that money on sound gear? The bottom line is that if your image sucks, but your sound is good, your audience will still follow you. But if your audio sucks, your audience will flee like scents from a conspiracy theorist. This is true for everything that you produce. Now, in terms of prep time, my Twitch solution was the most time effective for me compared to everything else that I tried. I delivered lectures more or less as I would have done in person. There were experiences that lasted for 40 to 50 minutes, and I had time left over to ask and answer questions. The format worked because when an audience is hearing a lecture live, they don't expect the presentation to be flawless. And if you make a boo-boo, you can correct it without losing your audience. Now, what about user experience? Twitch is largely a one-way user experience with me presenting and the audience watching. Twitch has some chat functions, but I disabled them and used Slido instead. I had a TA moderate the content to make sure that nobody trolled the session, and I had lots of good interactions throughout the semester. I could ask students questions, poll them about content I talked about, and they could ask me questions at any point throughout the presentation. Now, how did students consume the content? Well, it mapped on similarly to the in-person experience that is common here. Students often attend classes well through the first 3 or 4 weeks of the semester, and then that attendance declines to maybe around 20 or 30% of the enrolled class by the end of the semester. That was the experience of live consumption. About 50% of the students watched live and 50% more watched the videos that had been archived at any point throughout the semester. So not ideal, but time effective. Okay, so this last semester I tried a different tact in an attempt to get student engagement up. I produced two types of products. The first was a YouTube-style video that was no more than 15 minutes. That condensed what I would have said in a lecture into that time. I had been making one of those videos for each week. The second item that I produced was a podcast where I interviewed a world-leading academic or industry person on the themes related to the topic for that week. Those podcasts range from anywhere from about half an hour to an hour. Now, the videos are similar in terms of the one that you're watching right now. To get started, I spent a tremendous amount of time learning about various elements such as sound, lighting, performing the script, and editing. I would conservatively estimate that I spent more than 80 hours learning about these topics, and I still consider myself very much a novice. I also spent my own money on a good camera, a lens, and a teleprompter. That required an iPad, and I have a digital recorder and a lavalier mic. So all of that added up to a few thousand smackers. Other colleagues have produced good videos using green screen rooms on campus, but the lighting is average and it's sometimes quite hard to key out the green in post-production. Sound is sometimes variable. Plus, when demand pops for those green screen rooms, it can be really hard to get a time to go in. Other universities that prepare materials for online consumption have teams that assist with this pre and post production and better recording setups than what we do here at Flinders. This past semester, we didn't have those resources, so what that meant for me is that I needed to make my own resource investments, and besides money, the costliest and scarcest resource that I had to invest in was time. What does that investment look like? For me, to prep a video, I start with writing a script. To give you an idea, 2,000 words usually turns into a 12 to 14 minute video. If I know the material, it takes me a day to draft the script. If I don't, it takes me longer. Then I perform the script. I had a friend coach me through some basic delivery techniques to get me to where I am today. Every time I make a blooper, I restart, and then I edit out the mistakes later in post-production. Then I assemble the product in post-production using a freemium software called DaVinci Resolve. I add titles, cut bloopers, and if I had more time, I'd add B-roll or other images to enhance the viewing experience. A conservative estimate in terms of time outlay for a basic video with the skills that I presently have is 1 hour of time invested per minute of video produced. But based on usage, students like the produced videos. My videos have a watch rate of about 70%, and students who start watching usually finish them. Unlike the recorded lectures that I did with Twitch, where the experience was superior if live, the produced videos are viewer-friendly for people who are watching them at any point in time. Plus, those videos will be usable for at least 2 more years, thus reducing my load over time. So there is a massive time investment now, but I'm hoping that it'll pay dividends later. Okay. The final type of content that I produced was a podcast. Just like a good video, a good podcast requires good pre-production and post-production. I spent an afternoon writing an interview schedule. It takes about an hour to conduct the interview, then it takes another afternoon editing the interview, removing stumbles, cutting out awkward pauses, and assembling the episode. I do all of this to make sure the listening experience is the best that I can offer. I know I'm not Joe Rogan. I might have better hair, but I don't have the gift of gab and flow skills down pat yet. In terms of resources, I use a lot of the stuff I use for Twitch or the videos. I need an extra audio cable and an additional mic if I want to record another person live. So that sums up to be another $250 all up. Now, the podcasts, regardless of the length, are not as popular for the students. About a third of my students listen to the podcast on a regular basis. So the claim that the students often make that they want a full hour of content simply isn't true, even if the content they are offered has high production value. So, what are my takeaways? I have 4. First, we need to be monitoring the various variables like length, production value, performance, and presentation patterns in terms of content and whether students use that content. Second, we need to better communicate that what we produce, even if it's shorter, sometimes has the same content. We need to take the focus off of content runtime. Third, we need to understand how students consume content and how they incorporate that content into their learning experience. And fourth, and most critically, we need to be clear about the resource implications of delivering different types of content. And we need to develop efficiencies that allow us to work smarter and within the time we're contracted for. I'm Arvi Gundur. If you'd like to talk more about these technologies, please feel free to contact me. If you're interested in what I do, check out my website, ravejudgerun.com. I've linked to my academic and teaching materials, including the podcast I produced for my cybercrime topic. That's it for me. Goodbye, and good luck.